This is Sarah Levitt with the Making Magnificence Project, and today my guest is Matt Rhodes-Kropf, Managing Partner at Tectonic Ventures and Visiting Associate Professor in the Finance Department at MIT Sloan. Matt, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
I'm super excited to have you. And I'm kind of trying to think about where to begin, and I think that might be with Tectonic. And what you are most excited about. It's kind of, well, let's start with what Tectonic is, kind of your role there, and then what you're most excited about in 2021.
Sure. So Tectonic, we're a small, early stage venture capital company focused on really pre-seed and the seed rounds, really getting the companies up off the ground and launched with a B2B focused. And we invest around themes that are about how the world is changing that leads to drive the adoption of new technologies.
And anything there in particular that you can share with us about what you're kind of most excited about in 2021?
Oh, there's a lot of things. So
Yes.
a couple of themes that are exciting us. One is actually, we call it, we have nicknames for them so we can reference them very clearly. We call it fear of Amazon. And the idea that Amazon's doing a lot of incredible things and shifting the world, it's also scaring a lot of people. So there are a lot of, adjacencies to Amazon that are then saying, oh my goodness, we need to keep up, we need to change, we need to figure out how to do this differently and better. And so instead of technological adoption being, yes, something we might get to someday, it's we need this now, we need to try it, we need to get in here, we need to figure it out. So, for example, we've invested in a company which is a robot that goes up and down the aisles of a grocery store in real time with the customers there, doing all sorts of analytics on the shelves, price checking, planogram matching, and out of stock, but also helping the brands themselves monitor what's happening to their products inside the store. Most people don't know, but brands actually send people into stores to mark down on iPads what's happening. And instead we can do it real time all the time. So, but if we had done this 10 years ago, a grocery store might have adopted one at their corporate headquarters store or something so that they could show reporters how forward looking they are. Today, you talk to a grocery store and they say, we've got to get parity with Amazon. We've got to get digital parity. We've got to help, Instacart get around our stores, know what's there, help the buyers have a better buying product. All these kind of things are now, they're a must have, not a nice to have. And that kind of changes our ability to get to market.
And so that's one theme that you're kind of seeing. And I know there's one I want to get to that you mentioned when you spoke recently at my executive forum, at the Magnificent Leadership Executive Forum. But what other kind of trends or themes are you kind of seeing in addition to the fear of Amazon?
Yes, we call it blue jeans for AI. And the idea is to remind ourselves that when the gold rush was going on, you didn't want to be digging for gold. You wanted to be selling blue jeans to the people digging for gold.
Yeah, no, I love that analogy. Yeah.
And AI is really the same thing. It's kind of like lots of people oh, I'm investing in AI. We're not going to call it AI in the future. We're going to call it software. Just like we used to call it .com companies, and now we just call them companies again, right? Who's not online? What does it even mean to be not online? And in the future, what does it mean that your software doesn't collect any data and then use that data to help make the software? But what? Your software doesn't do that? Why doesn't it do that? That's how software is written. That's what it does. And in order for that to happen, there's a lot of sort of supporting players and infrastructure plays around that then allow for everyone to easily be incorporating these types of aspects into their code.
So it's going to be normative, it sounds like soon, as opposed to kind of cutting edge and
already things that it took people 3 or 4 years to make a first version of an AI that analyzed something and could make could tell what a kitty looked like, or any is now well, that's just an off the shelf. You just grab that on Amazon, throw a couple pictures at it, and boom, it knows what a kid Yep.
Yep.
Already, that's not the That's not what's tough about AI. There's a lot of really interesting things happening around AI about synthetic data and how we need to then iterate on our AI, how we need to know what's happening inside of there, what it's doing, all these kind of things. Are we improving it? And what does it even mean to improve it? Did it get better in every direction or just in some aspects? So there's a lot of interesting things around that idea rather than just I can look at pictures and determine if something is a kitty or not, or whatever, even if it's a good use case. Determine.
Right. What do you think it would mean to improve AI?
Oh, so there's,
Did I ask the wrong question?
Yes.
Like the big question.
It's a meta question, right? Like, so when you think about, well, you could just think about multiple, even simplistically, you could think about having multiple dimensions on which you wanted to be able to have your AI know something. So it could literally just get better at this, but worse at that, right? Whatever two dimensions that you pick, the answer is, well, we might be able to do something that made it better at one thing, but worse at another. And that can happen for all sorts of different reasons about how you train the algorithm or improve the algorithm or what it's using or not using. And you tell it what data to use and then how to change that. I mean, I can go into, I have some cool investments I've had to go into. They get a little, they get a little deep.
A little deep. Okay. So one of the other, no, I love this concept of trends. So one of the things you mentioned when you spoke at my executive forum, and this really caught my attention, Matt, because it was in the context of AI. You said that there was going to be this trend, this increasing trend for things going bespoke in the future. And so I wanted to talk to you about that in terms of what you think is pushing it. And, if you had to guess where the greatest need and opportunity is going to be for bespoke / art / customization.
So if you think about it this way, let's imagine 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever, you had an idea for any product, okay, that you wanted to sell. Let's just make it a new type of dishwashing soap. I mean, it doesn't matter. What would you have had to have done? First of all, it would have been incredibly hard for you to iterate. Like, how would you have gotten a chemical formulation of your soap and then tried it and then to ask for another one? How would you have gotten it manufactured, even if once you got a soap up? And if you solved those problems, which are hard enough, how would you have sold it to anyone?
Yep.
And the way things got sold, and by the way, how would anyone have known to buy it? So how would you have marketed to anyone, let alone how do they actually physically get the product? And so we had things like Tide, which are, an army of people behind Tide, of billions in advertising so that we all know the word Tide. And then they use their power as a CPG company to say, and we're going to put Tide on the shelf at eye height in the grocery store. And since the only place people shop was in the grocery store, eye height in the grocery store, then you bought Tide because you knew what it was. Now, if you think about today, all of these steps are like way lighter and easier. I can get up, I can have somebody, over the internet, somebody will make me a formulation. I try it. I can find 50 different possible suppliers. I can toss it up on Amazon and ship it out to you, do a little, Instagram or Facebook group. And suddenly I've got buyers. And then even you think about like, so I can do all that. Then instead of having to have a product that everybody wants, right? If you think about like Tide is like, it's a soap we all can use. Instead, I can make a little itchy soap, right? I can make organic soap with mud from Costa Rica that like whatever weird thing that you want. And then there's going to be some little group of people go, oh, I love Costa Rica. I went there on my vacation. I want mud from Costa Rica in my soap. This is a bad example, but so, and then you find your buyers, and your buyers, they would have had to been concentrated in the sense that like, since there was a grocery store, the only reason you could put one in the grocery store is if you had somebody nearby that grocery store who was going to buy it. But again, no concentration necessary. We can have one guy in Alaska who likes it, and 3 people in New York, and 4 people in Venezuela, whatever it is. And there's a little bit of supply chain distribution that makes what I just said, that's so, but getting easier and easier and easier to have a very distributed group of people, which means you can find the 1 million people, which is a tiny fraction of the world, that happen to want your little bespoke product. So you can get it made, you can get it shipped, you can sell it to them, you can find them, you can market to them, all these things. So instead of having Tide, we're all gonna like get into our weird little, I like my minty soap, you like your strawberry soap, whatever, with organic wheat flows.
Right.
And you start thinking about this and you're like, well, that's true in almost every product category. Right. So you just name a product category and you can go, well, we don't have to make 700, thousands of them anymore. We don't have to slam down, or as all the manufacturing processes become more computer, right? More robotic. You can say, hey, robot, make this one in this color, make that one in that color, and make this one slightly bigger. And it's just parameters. If you program the robot, it goes, okay, you can't have humans like, you can't have an assembly line that's going, whoa, hey, change. It's not an assembly line anymore. But assembly line that's completely robotic is also much more flexible. Not in every way, but
yeah.
So,
yeah.
We've been investing around this idea to try to look for places where instead of trying to do one massive product that's like big and famous and everybody knows about it, instead can we figure out a way to, with technology, then manage a whole array of products, and of course the whole supply chain is done differently, right? You've got to bring these products together, maybe from different places, but get them into one crate to cross the ocean or to head to Europe, and then distribute them in different warehouses so that they can be fast, always kind of. But that's all, that's automation, right? We can do that now. And then same with the advertising side or the SEO. You can search engine optimization on Amazon. Are you going to do that instead of having one person trying to do the marketing for title, your SEO, and that can be something done with technology.
So I'm hearing, this is interesting. You gave a different answer, which I love. You gave a different answer than what I expected. So what I'm hearing is kind of using technology to create customization, as opposed to technology being distinct from that customization, but using it as a tool, as a leverage point to actually get more specific. Am I hearing that right?
Yes.
That's an interesting.
A lot of very particular, easy ways of doing all sort of one-off or small run batch, that kind of thing, that would be very cost inefficient, right? The big CPG companies, they shut down small brands. They try brands, like, oh, it didn't really work, and they shut it down. Yeah. Like, well, no, you can run it efficiently. Like, don't get me wrong, you've got to run it differently than they run it. But if you can run it differently, like, you don't need to shut down a small brand. We can take all 400,000 people who love that brand and keep it alive for them.
So I want to shift to you, because you have such an incredibly interesting kind of path, and the making
randomness, you mean?
Yes, and making Magnificence project is in large part kind of talking to people about leaders, about their paths and how they iterated and et cetera. And I've heard you describe your path as somewhat random, but then upon kind of not closer inspection, but taking a step back, you saw that there was kind of this theme of wanting to impact and change the world. So can you take us through a bit of your own story, Matt, to date?
Sure.
And kind of the big things that maybe at the time seemed kind of random, but fit into this larger whole.
Yes, absolutely. I'm trying to think about where
there's so many. I know there's so many.
So throughout my life, I have been either an entrepreneur or helping start companies, an investor, or a professor. And it's that third one that's a little, Other two might seem to go together. And what I think why I call it random is I don't think there was a lot of intentionality to do any of the three. They were just they were what I naturally did and kept doing things that sort of kept happening to me. And then when I look back, as you mentioned, actually it was a friend, Linda Applegate at HBS, who sort of laughed at me when I walked into her office one time and said, I'm supposed to write down what my overarching, what my life is about. And it's all random. I just do random things. And she started laughing hysterically. She's like, you don't do random things.
Yeah.
Your life has been this very clear trajectory toward what you love. And I was like, oh my God. So she really helped me see it. Um, so I started out early on in computers. My parents helped me get a computer when they were, I had, a TRS-80, the little, thing with a tape deck and and so I was doing programming very early on and ended up at a high school for geeks and nerds, Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology in Northern Virginia. Because of that, I had completed a lot of my degree requirements for computer science by the time I got down to Duke. And so that led me to literally look around and think, well, what, okay, so I started done a lot of computer science classes. I guess I'll take other classes, which then, turned me right. I also, when I was there at Duke, I bought a bar. And
I was hoping you would get there. I have to say, I was hoping you would get there. Yeah, tell us about this, Matt.
So, it turns out when you're 19 in North Carolina, you can both buy a bar and run a bar. You just can't drink. I didn't drink. That's the story, and we're sticking with that. But it was a couple of aspects that were interesting. So one, I ended up talking some other people into investing into the bar. So my wife, actually, and I have 4 lovely children.
Good investment, man.
So that worked out well. Good thing it paid off. So we bought, and my roommate, my college roommate, actually bought the bar also, and my college roommate actually invests with me today in the fund. So these people have been with me my whole life.
Nice.
So we bought this bar, and we bought it with other students, and it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about how you want to spend your day and what you want to do, and what kinds of things you want to be involved in. Running a bar was enormous fun on Thursday night, and Friday night, and Saturday night, and really not great at all on Tuesday morning. Really wanted to tell anybody who was in the bar to go home, please. Why are you here? So there was, your best customer is actually someone you're trying to not sell them. It's like, so it became very like, oh my goodness. So actually the next thing I opened was a gym, because I was like, now I'm going to be super happy when I sell you the thing I sell you. It's going to be good for you. But so we did the bar. The bar worked out very well, but the other students, some of them were getting their PhD. And so for no particularly good reason, I ended up with a PhD in game theory. And that's where things start going a little random, because I think I was just going to graduate from Duke and I go into business or program. I had, no great, I don't think I had some great vision. I guess if you would ask me, I would have said, I guess I'm going to code when I graduate. But I ended up with a PhD in game theory. Super fun. That and $5 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks. But then Columbia University offered me a job as a finance professor. And you're as stunned as I was, because you will notice that I had run a bar and I had a PhD in game theory, but didn't actually know any finance, which would seem to be a prerequisite for the position. The first year that I was teaching, I won the teaching award because I was reading the book like a week ahead of my students. I was like, and then I would go into class and be like, this stuff is so cool. And when they say, I don't understand this, I'm like, I know, I didn't understand it either. Like last week, I didn't understand it. So like,
I was just having a conversation last night with a dear friend, and this is like the extreme example of this, but we were just saying, it's often that what we're telling other people is the stuff we need to kind of be saying to ourselves. This is the extreme example of that. Yeah. So
it was great. I super enjoyed it. I got a whole nother degree in finance, about being a finance professor for years. So I went up to Columbia, became a finance professor, did not really think that I would be a professor, and continued to help launch businesses. So we did the gym. And then when I got to Columbia, I started investing more broadly. Started investing in actually some fintech, although we didn't call it that back then. Axioma is a big one. They did very well. Rackspace is another investment I made at the time, and actually one of the co-founder of Rackspace is now a partner with me in my fund. So we've been invested together for the next 20 years. So I invested in that. I started a biotech firm. It gets even more random from here. So I started a biotech firm. You will notice I didn't know any biotech. Luckily, my partner did. So we raised a lot of money. We ended up selling that to Lilly. That worked, worked out extremely well. And I'm just a helper, right? Like in these things, like I help somebody else who's like launching their brilliant idea. And so then I helped launch a hedge fund. I helped launch another company. And then, and during this time, I actually slowly leave academia. So I'm publishing and I'm writing and doing things, but slowly I leave academia.
And is that because kind of the launching is really pulling you at this point?
Yes. So I also switch all my teaching to teaching entrepreneurial finance.
Yeah.
So I'm now at this point, I'm co-teaching with the dean of the business school, and we're teaching entrepreneurial finance because this is what I love doing. And so then when I do the biotech, so I've left academia now altogether. That gets sold to Lilly. And somewhere in here, I'm sitting around, I've helped start a hedge fund, and I've left. I'm sitting around in my underwear, and Harvard calls. It says, Josh Lerner-Felda said, you should come up and teach the VCPE class. And I was like, huh, okay.
That sounds cool, yeah.
Cool. Well, didn't really have anything to do, so I'm off. So we headed up to Boston, and it was supposed to be for a few years, turned into 8 years. But eventually I decided that I really couldn't be in academia. So I keep sort of going to academia and then sort of coming back from academia. Like I just couldn't do it full time. And so left and started Tectonic Ventures. And then after I was completely again out of academia, MIT found out. Said, you can have an office, hang out here, teach whatever you want. So I teach over at MIT now, a fintech class, fintech incubator, super fun, and entrepreneurial finance class.
So yeah, my brain's going in several different directions here, but I want to kind of talk to you about entrepreneurship and how you regard risk, because I've heard you speak about this, and I'd love, given that you're teaching so much in the arena and have taught in the arena of entrepreneurial finance, I'd like to speak about that. But let me back up first to when you kind of had that conversation with, was it Linda Applegate?
Yep.
And saw this thread of kind of wanting to change the world. Can you say more about that and what that means to you, Matt, kind of that impact that you're striving for?
Yeah, so she made it clear that sort of everything I was doing was about launching things. Even the teaching was just launching, just help people launch whatever they're launching. Always, of course, focused on having a positive outcome. I mean, the greatest thing about the biotech was that we were helping to fix Alzheimer's. I mean, like, when you get up in the morning, I want to go to work. You're like, yeah, I want to go to work.
Yeah.
We have to solve this problem.
Yeah.
And while we invest in all sorts of things, they don't have to be that, like, when I talk to students a lot about like, invest with passion and do what you want to do with passion. It doesn't mean you have to be, saving the starving children, although that's a wonderful thing to be trying to do.
Yeah.
There are lots of passions around business problems that need fixing. And when you fix them, remember, more people are going to have jobs. And one of the greatest things you can do for a human being is give them a job, a purpose, and something to do. So like, if you're just building jobs, you're doing a wonderful thing for the world. So have a passion to fix a problem, grow it, do well in the world with that problem. I mean, don't have a passion to poison the environment, but you can create. You don't need to have something so directly related to like save the world for it to be your passion. It can be, a passion for fixing, how helping Amazon retailers sell more on Amazon is still a valuable thing. Amazon retailers are small business people who are trying to sell and make a living and live their lives. If you can help them, you're doing good and doing well for yourself while doing it. So I think I got completely off topic while you were talking about.
No, that's exactly. So I wanted to kind of understand how you understand the impact of your work. Yeah, no, and
all of it is about, can we build these companies and grow and help people live their lives?
Yeah. So when you are talking to potential entrepreneurs or when you are launching people who are launching, and you're talking to them about risk, particularly those who might be quite risk averse or even just downright scared. How do you kind of coach them through that? What's your perspective on risk? Particularly now, like kind of generally, and then let's get specific because we're in the middle of a pandemic.
I think people misperceive risk a lot. And let me start with, if you are, responsible for taking care of your parents and your 8 children, and they eat because you work,
yeah,
you have risk, you need a job, you got to work. Okay. Most people are not actually there. And you can set up your life to make sure that you're not there, in the sense of keep your expenses below what you can actually spend, things like this. You don't have to get yourself on that edge. And so many people are like, oh, I'm so scared that I wouldn't have a job or whatever. That's not the, like, if you're educated, hardworking, ready to go, the risk is that you look back at the end of your life and you didn't do anything with it. That's the risk. And sometimes it's like, that's where you don't want to be. What you don't want to be is holding onto your desk with your fingernails, praying that the last 7 years of your work will go by so that you can retire, so you can finally do what you want to do. Like, that's the risk. And start a startup and it fails. Okay, then go get a job. I mean, don't get me wrong, this is not true for absolutely everybody in the world. There are people where there are real, remember, 7 billion people on the planet, 6 billion of them make less than $38 a day. So there's lots of part of the world where, like, there's real risk. Mostly for the entrepreneurs that I talk to and the kind of people I teach, it's coming out of MIT or Harvard, like, this is not a risk. Like, this is not a risk. Risk is a boring job. not this. This is life. Go do it. Of course. Like, why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you try it? And then the risk becomes a secondary thing, which is a personal thing. Many people who are high performers and really driven in life do not go around over promising and under delivering. Okay. It's just like, it's a core aspect that we go around under promising and over delivering. And it's totally. Like always, like, it's like who we are. Entrepreneurship is this weird activity where you have to go out and you have to write down this huge vision about how you're going to take over the world and give me money, millions of dollars, because I'm going to make millions of dollars, and you're convincing people to join you and to give you money and to buy your new product that you haven't yet built. It doesn't quite work as well as you hoped. And it's a very nerve-wracking thing, because you are like setting yourself up not just to potentially fail, which is actually quite likely, but to have told everybody ahead of time and then very publicly announce, I'm out. I have 100% failed. It's over. And that, I think people don't like that idea way more than the actual, like, what will be the true result of that failure. The true result of that failure is you go into your next interview and they say, oh, what have you been doing? You say, I tried to launch this company. We raised a few $1 million. And they go, that's so cool. Like, you must have a ton. You have all this experience. Like, the true outcome is actually not bad at all. You have this, war stories. Everybody's been involved in the business that failed. Like, okay. But that idea that you said, it's like people who write books don't necessarily announce ahead of time, I'm about to write a best-selling book. I promise that it will best sell. Like, no, that's not what you do. You write the book and then it starts selling and then you start talking about it and then it starts selling more. And then you go, yeah, I wrote a best-selling book. So, but entrepreneurs have to announce their best-selling book before writing it.
Yes. Yeah. So how, excuse me, how have you, I think that distinction is really interesting. So it's not just the, oh, what if I fail and don't have income? Like, there's that layer, but then there's the deeper, I've said this publicly, and and
I've convinced other people
and I don't have it yet, we're still in the vision phase,
and I know perfectly well that I might not. Right, this is the part that's always like,
right,
I've written down projections of what I'm going to sell next year.
Right.
Come on, we all know I don't know what I'm going to sell next year.
Yeah.
And like often, literally what I do with my entrepreneurs is like, whenever they put up projections, I go, well, of course, we have no idea what you're going to sell next year. But yeah, these seem reasonable given, how are they driving our plans for spending, and at what point are we going to like learn a little more and then decide, oh, we're not really going to sell that, so we need spending. Like, just make it always clear. We really have no idea.
Yes.
And so I understand that you're not promising those revenues, and you understand that you're not promising revenues. So relax. We're in this together to try to figure it out.
Has there been a time when you've really had to, along your journey, when you've had to kind of confront the gap between a promise and then it not turning out the way you had hoped? And kind of how did you find your way through that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, in some sense, like a lot when you deal with entrepreneurship. So
Yes.
right as I was closing my first fund, we had one of our investments just go horribly wrong. And the awkward thing about that is I had collected paperwork, and which meant people had signed, they were done. I could simply close and make them a part of my fund. But now I knew that one of the investments that we were going to instantly be a part of was a failure and likely to make them losses. So I had to go back to everyone and say, by the way, before I close on your paperwork, should probably point out that you're buying into a negative stub. Like you're literally buying into losses. Do you still want to participate? And of course, deal with the aftermath of, well, what went wrong and why did you do it? And then what, and all the questions and everything around it. And so, yeah, and when you're in entrepreneurship, there's definitely repeated failure. And then there's a lot of, you have to look at yourself. What did you miss? What did you do wrong? How did you, you can't just say every time, oh, well, who cares? We knew we were going to make some losses. Why did we make those losses? What happened this time? Was there something we should have learned, should have seen coming? Or did we just get blindsided by COVID or something where you're like, wow, wasn't really supposed to expect that one.
Right. Didn't see that. Yeah. When you are talking with prospective entrepreneurs, so people who are kind of considering the path, do you have a sense at this point, Matt, about, that person's got the stuff, the special sauce, the pixie dust, or are you still kind of surprised sometimes, like, oh, that person actually made a go of it?
I used to have a stronger belief that I knew what it looked like, and I have gone away from that over the years.
Because say more about that. Yeah, that's really interesting.
So, some of it is from literally what society has all raised for us all, this idea of that even if we're not explicitly racist or biased in some way, that we may be implicitly and almost certainly are implicitly biased. And at Harvard, for example, they would analyze how you were teaching in the classroom and tell you things about who you called on, where you looked, and how, and like sometimes it would be obvious that you were like, really, I do that? Oh my God, that's horrible. How could I be doing that? I don't believe that in my head.
Yeah.
So, but that actually, so not just because I always, like, for example, women, my sister was always smarter than me. My mother always worked. I always believed women. I always thought they were better than I was. So that's how that was my view. But like, so it's not just like, can women be a CEO, but it's more of even within a man, what are the supposed characteristics that make you a great CEO? And is it really being tall and having a, commanding presence? Or is it something else? And that's where we really started looking in and saying, there are people that just generate loyalty and a following, and people want to work for them. And that's, by the way, often not because maybe they're Mr. Personality or something. It's because people start going, oh, that guy, he's gonna do something amazing, and I want to be standing near him. And even though he puts a lot of pressure on me and like pushes me, and and he's not my buddy. There's no, it's like, but I want to be on that. I want to be on that trip. And there's, and so I look for those kind of things. So I do still think, we do have to judge an entrepreneur and ask ourselves, Do they have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? I think just what it takes to be an entrepreneur, I think what my view of what that is has shifted to, I look for these more signs of, are you actually, are you doing what you said you did? Is your team, loyal and joining you and sticking with you and all these kind of things? Like, you're going to have to build this organization. Do you have a great corporate culture, even though you might not seem on the outside like to match what an entrepreneur is supposed to be?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So it's, I find that so interesting because with all of your experience, it's kind of cool to think that at this point you've got a sketch maybe about some of the characteristics, but that there's still surprises.
Yeah, and actually just almost going away from the characteristics toward data in a sense, like
Yeah.
not necessarily hard data, but toward,
Yeah.
are you actually just getting it done? Because then like I can throw out my whole like opinion of whether or not you can lead and just be like, well, you are leading, right? Like,
yes.
I see you doing it. I talk to your employees, and just the way they talk means that this shop is running great. And like, so you don't, I don't, then you don't need to match any of my characteristics in my head. You're getting it done.
So in terms of leadership, because obviously that's a keen interest of mine. You've mentioned being able to kind of generate loyalty and followership. Anything else that you think is key to successful leadership?
I would say it like this: it's not a specific trait, although of course there are clearly bad things to do and good things to do, but in some sense it's, you have to be authentic. So it's, you have to lead in the way you lead. So I can't tell you something like, you have to be very strict with your rules, or you have to be very close with your employees and talk to them about personal things, or you have to not talk to them about personal things, or you have to, what, all these different things. Like, there's no, it turns out no, there's no rules. There is your way of leading, and you've got to sort of magnify the strengths of your way of leading and reduce the weaknesses of your way of leading. And that might be very, very different from somebody else's way of leading, and why people follow them and why they want to be in that organization. I mean, just, it's like, you can just see it unbelievably weirdly differently. We had one entrepreneur who, we went in, he was charging his, next to the coffee machine in a startup, there was a little cup where you put a quarter in. You think I'm kidding? You put a quarter in.
This is so fantastic.
So then when you poured a coffee, you're supposed to quarter it. And after we invested, I was like, we're going to cover the coffee from now on. Okay. So like, we want the employees to drink the coffee so they stay focused. Like, I tell you, everything about this person is like that. And like, everybody who works there, they're all great. They love him. They've worked with him for decades. Like, he gets these people, they're super loyal. They're all super lean. And you know what I mean? They do it this way, and it's how he runs the whole company, and it's great. And it absolutely fits. And I have, other employees that are, other CEOs that like have a totally different approach to how this, we need to spend, and we need to be the superstar. What you can't do is be I'm the guy who really wants to charge you 25 cents for coffee, and yet try to take I'm going to be the big spender kind of, you'll just screw that up. And you also can be the I'm going to be the big spender and go and be like, okay, let's be super lean, because you'll just screw that up.
So I'm hearing, when you're saying kind of authenticity, I'm hearing kind of congruence with oneself and showing up that way, not trying to be something that one is not, but to magnify to your point, the strengths, the good stuff, and just not try to be anything else.
Not try to be anything else. So that you're not trying to say to yourself, oh, I see this person, they're a wonderful leader, I'm going to lead just like they do.
Yep.
No.
Yes.
What are they doing that I really like, that really kind of, fits with me? Oh, I should.
Yes.
You see something, you go, that's such a good idea. I should do that.
Yeah.
Perfect. Adopt that. Don't adopt what they're doing.
Yes. It's interesting because I've been reading this nonfiction work on Churchill, and as someone who works with leaders, it's and it's kind of this narrative nonfiction. And what's really
I just read
interesting,
it.
did you? The Splendid and the Vile?
Yeah.
Okay, so you know what I'm talking about then. So I'm reading this, Matt, and I'm going, this is so fascinating to me because, first of all, he's full of contradictions, as we all are as human beings.
Absolutely.
And so many of the things, so this is what strikes me, so many of the things that we ascribe to great leadership,
He's not doing.
is that, and he's Winston Churchill,
Right,
you know?
right. And he is the epitome of, great leadership.
Like held off Hitler.
Right,
I
right.
mean, like,
Bigger.
and
Yeah.
so so that's been real. And so when you're talking about authenticity, and I'm using the word congruence, I think Churchill is a great example.
He is. That's a wonderful example.
Yeah.
Churchill's Churchill, and he is the whole time, right? Whether he's throwing a party in the middle of, World War II,
Yes. Yeah.
because that's who he is. And he's going to
Yeah.
stay up late drinking, and he
Yes.
turns his stay up late drinking sessions into wonderful times where he communicates and
Yes.
ideas about how we're going to win the war. And
Yes.
and if you said, oh, I've never had a drop of alcohol in my life, I'm going to start imitating Winston Churchill and have drunk parties in the evening. I mean, it would be just such a disaster, right?
Yes.
And if you told Winston Churchill never drink with your work colleagues, let's all be busy, he would have been a terrible leader. It's a great example of, like, you just got to be who you are and figure out how to make it work for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting too, you're talking about kind of the loyalty factor. And that's a theme throughout this book as well, is just how incredibly hardworking and loyal people were to Churchill and how much he demanded. Yeah.
But I also think people underestimate the loyalty that is generated by being authentic. Like,
Yes. And we can all sense it too when there's that incongruence. I think just as human beings, we're kind of like, there's something that doesn't fit kind of here.
Right, we're all wired up. So that person who's trying so hard to hide that thing from you that they don't, it's like, well, all you're doing is putting off a vibe of, I don't know, something's wrong. So cut it out and, like, stop trying to hide that thing about you that's like, I play video games and I'm not supposed to tell you that I enjoy video games because I'm supposed to be a cool intellectual. It's like, no, I actually, and personally, I enjoy video games. Like, I play my son, I really like them a lot. Like,
yeah.
And you just got to be that person. And then, like, people don't like you because you do something weird, like play video games as an adult. Like, okay.
Yeah, no, that's it's super fun. It's cool that you just finished reading the book too. I'm working my way through it, but like every page I'm like, what?
Right,
like, this is who he was. Yeah. It's just fascinating. So a couple questions.
Particularly for me that he's like a disaster with his finances. Like,
so I was going to say that too. Like, I was like, when I got to the part about how he's like up to his eyeballs in debt, and he just says to his staffer, like, can you just take care of this? I'm dealing with Hitler right now. Like, go deal with this.
Right. And first of all, today, I think you'd be in a lot of trouble for how they took care of it. Right. Right. You just find somebody to make all these debts go away. Yes, some rich people would be happy to do that for you. Okay, weird, but totally consistent with Churchill, right?
Right. Like, that's what I mean. Like, the things we ascribe to leadership today are not, and yet he was Winston Churchill. But yes, no, every page I'm kind of like, what? So a couple things here as we wind down. You have talked about the concept of having a big life, and you've mentioned, earlier in this conversation about essentially not looking back with regret. So
yeah, your life, by the way, not big as I think I wouldn't want to put that on it. Like, your life.
Just live your life. Something that's
How do you really want to spend your day every day? What do you really want to do?
Yeah.
And you'll probably figure out a way. I mean, don't get me again. Always I go back to, unless you're starving and you need. I mean, I could totally get the fact that people have to have a job and do that. So I'm not just willy-nilly about it. But particularly, the more you have a high education and the ability to do lots of different things, like, what should you be trying to do? The answer is not make more money. It's not really. That's not such a great plan. Or how do you want to spend your day? You'll be fine.
Yeah. And so along those lines, what are you kind of still curious about? What have you not tackled?
Oh, I'm definitely going to be a hit rock star soon. That's on the list. I haven't been there, but like movie star, I think movie star is clearly. I mean, you were going to guess that, right? So I think
Absolutely.
movie star is coming. Uh, I love what I do. I sort of stunned every day that people pay me to teach. I'm stunned every day that they pay me to invest, which I would do anyway, all day long, no problem. In fact, when I first was starting to make investments, it was a friend that called me up. Other people were starting to join the investments that I would make. And one of my friends said, "Matt, I think you're supposed to be charging us for finding us investments." I was like, "Really?" Oh, I guess you're right. It's an actual job thing. Okay. And he said, "Yeah, you charge us." So I'm stunned people, pay me that. So this is what I want to do. I love doing this. I'm blown away that I get to do it all the time. A friend was just telling me the other day, one of my investors said, "I feel like I'm funding your hobby." I was like, "You are." I didn't know I made it so obvious, but thank you for finding my hobby. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So you're doing exactly what you want to do. And are spending so there's not necessarily kind of a next on the horizon as much as kind of
It's the
continuing to do what you
next,
do.
it's the next, I love when these companies can make it from so small to really kind of, changing the world in some way.
Yeah.
Then and then when we actually see them out there in the world rather than just in my little sphere, like my partner and I helped create a company that has a robot that sterilizes hospital rooms in a few minutes, and now investors that came in, they like see them in hospitals and they're like, "Oh." And you can go and like one goes by and you're like, "Yeah, we did that. That was fun. We changed something. We obviously saved a lot of lives, but just seeing it anywhere out there in the world is sort of incredible." So I have this driving desire to kind of do it again, like do something, make something that actually goes incredibly big and lasts, impact that lasts 50 years or longer.
It's funny as we're talking. I've got one more question that I ask every interviewee, but before we get there, it's interesting to me. I don't think I've ever, and I hang out with a bunch of entrepreneurs. I don't think I've ever seen entrepreneurship as creative. And it's super creative. Like as you're kind of describing this, right? Like you're making something and then it goes out into the world. Like it's a very creative process. And I'm not sure I ever put that together.
And everything about it, from not just like what's the product, but like there is no product. What's the product is then this constant iteration, and what is the customer saying, and how is it being used, and how can we change it? But even how do we reach the customer? So like, what we could try this technique or that technique or this, or we could have, we could do this fun thing. We could try blogging. It's, everything is, and come up with some new, interesting, creative way to get out there, to get our thing, to get known, to become, it's what's the business strategy. Just even the economic business strategy is fascinating. There's a million of them, and which is the right one here, and or could we invent a new one if there's a need for a new one like that?
Yeah, it's fun. It's interesting. It's fundamentally creative. So last question, which is the question I ask of all interviewees for the Making Magnificence project, is the best advice you never got.
Never got. Okay, so this is actually relates more to me. I had a very strong, I'm going to do this myself kind of attitude, to the point that I was essentially rejecting people who were trying to mentor me, or almost sort of holding them off a little bit, because I wanted to show them I could do it without that help. And what I realized is, like, I was hurting both of us.
Mm.
The mentor wants to be a mentor. They want to use their experience and what they've done for the world to help make it easier for someone who came behind them. And I didn't lose anything. I didn't give up anything if I allowed them to mentor me and help me. And I just helped us both. Like it was only a positive. And I have to, even to this day, I have to tell myself all the time, if somebody offers the slightest help, I always say, "I'd love to hear it. I'd love help. I'd love to have you involved, or have you, guide me in some way." because I know like we're both going to get something out of this. But really, for years, I kind of push people away. So if I'm talking to someone young, I just tell them to really like to listen for those mentors. Like they're around you. Listen for when somebody starts giving you a little extra advice or pulls you aside and says, you know, do this or do that, or, you know, speak like this in a meeting or whatever the advice is, and be like, thank you. Do you have anything else for me? And oh, let me go see you again in 3 weeks and ask you, do you have any advice for my career, or I have this other problem, and like actually, you know, sort of allow it, create it, make it happen, rather than that opposite, that feeling of no, I'm gonna prove I can do it on my own.
That's great. Thank you. And that's a great place to wind down. Thank you, Matt. My guest today has been Matt Rhodes-Kropf of Tectonic Ventures, and it has been a pleasure to do this interview. Thank you.
Thank you.